I have no idea how the chess world keeps giving us controversial things to talk about, but here we are. The 2024 Champions Chess Tour Finals began on the 18th of December. To get to the point of this topic, I need to give you a brief introduction to the format of this tournament. 8 players made it to the final of the Champions Chess Tour. Jan Nepomniachtchi, Wesley So, Denis Lazovic, Vincent Kaymer, and Levon Aronian all qualified through the Champions Chess Tour leaderboard. This essentially means that they were the most successful players within the Champions Chess Tour tournaments that didn't win first place. The other 3 participants were players that did win one of the 3 tournaments. Magnus Carlsen won the Chessable Masters, Alireza Firouzja won the Chess.com Classic, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave won the Crunch Labs Masters. These 8 players then play in a unique round-robin format. For example, if Magnus Carlsen drew Alireza Firouzja, Magnus would play one game with white, and then momentarily after the game ends, he would play with black. If the result is still not decisive, the 2 players bid for time, and black gets draw odds. This means that the player with the white pieces must win the game or they'll be knocked out. The time control is 10 minutes, but it's obviously preferable to hold a draw with black than winning a game with white. So, players must bid on how much time they would like to play with if they were the black pieces. However, if your opponent bids a lower time than you did, they get to play with black. Neither player is allowed to know what their opponent bids. Round 4 is where the controversy occurred. By this point, Levon Aronian sat on 0 points. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Wesley So, Alireza Firouzja, and Vincent Kaymer sat on 1 point. Jan Nepomniachtchi sat on 2 points, and Denis Lazovic and Magnus Carlsen sat on 3 points. It was Magnus Carlsen versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in round 5. In the first game with the white pieces, Magnus won after 51 moves with the ready, but in the following game, Maxime won in 77 moves with the Roy Lopez. The game was forced into an Armageddon tiebreak. Magnus bid 6 minutes 56 seconds to play with the black pieces, and Maxime bid 7 minutes 34 seconds. This meant that Magnus would play with the black pieces with 6 minutes and 56 seconds on his clock, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave would play with the white pieces and 10 minutes on his clock. However, if Maxime drew or lost the game, he would lose the match as a whole. At the peak of the game, it looked like Maxime would get the better of Magnus, holding a plus 3.4 position over the world number 1 with plenty of time to calculate. However, on move 47, Maxime incorrectly traded his knight for the bishop and entered a completely drawn endgame even though he was up a pawn. On move 56, Magnus called the arbiter, claiming that the position had repeated 3 times, and there was no need for the game to continue as he could legally claim a draw and win the match over Maxime. For those who haven't seen the match, here is the position on move 50 after Maxime played bishop c3. Again, the position repeats on move 54, where Maxime plays king b6. And finally, the position would repeat a 3rd time on move 56, when Maxime played bishop c3, and Magnus claims the draw. The last part of information is very important to note. You cannot claim a draw by threefold repetition on your opponent's move. If your opponent has repeated the position 3 times, you need to pause your clock and call the arbiter. Here's a clip from the chess.com broadcast where you can clearly see Magnus Carlsen pauses his clock and doesn't move his piece. Later on in the chess.com broadcast, the real board is shown, showing that the game didn't end on bishop c3 like you'd expect if Magnus had claimed the draw correctly. But knight c8 actually wasn't played by Magnus, it was played by the on-site arbiter who needed to update the board in order to see if threefold repetition occurred. Immediately after pausing the clock, the chess.com commentators assume he is claiming a draw. Just 10 seconds after the clock was stopped, English grandmaster and commentator David Howell recognized that the position had been repeated 3 times, on move 50, 54, and 56. A long check was undertaken by the arbiters at the event, and eventually both the crowd and commentators thought the decision must have been a draw. Here's the live reaction from the broadcast.
See this game continue, potentially conclude?
Okay, we're
it's
still
given.
figuring out.
The draw is given. It is a repetition of positions.
1.
Oh, wait. No.
Is it not?
Go on. Wow, I'm very confused that the arbiters decide ultimately that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave gets more time and the game continues, but I'm very surprised. I see the moves in front of me.
The arbiters at the event inexplicably came to the conclusion that there was no threefold repetition in the game. They awarded Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with an extra minute on his clock for Magnus Carlsen's wrongful claim of a draw, and the game continued. The game was completely drawn regardless though, and just 5 moves later, the two players drew by agreement. I have absolutely no idea how this even happens. Of course, it is much more efficient to rely on a computer than a human to tell us if a threefold repetition has occurred. But the fact that a computer can get such a simple thing wrong here is absolutely insane. We have engines that are rated over 3,600 ELO, but can't get computers to reliably tell us if there was a threefold repetition over 6 moves. I also feel that this should slightly be on the arbiters. David Howell immediately recognized that there was a threefold repetition and could tell us the moves that it happened on. The arbiters quite literally blindly trusted the computer without checking for themselves. I do understand the necessity of relying on the computers for this kind of decision though. Let's say that the arbiters take 5 minutes to decide whether or not it was a threefold repetition, and if it was a wrongful claim, the opponent only gets 1 extra minute on their clock. That means that the player who claimed a draw would get 5 extra minutes to calculate their position. This can easily be abused by players who are low on time, so it is optimal to rely on computers. But it wasn't a difficult repetition to spot. If the arbiters just asked Magnus where the repetition occurred, they could have easily put it on the board themselves and came to a conclusion as fast as the computer. Overall, luckily, it didn't matter. Both Magnus Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave both progress in the tournament and will meet each other in the semi-finals. But it definitely could have mattered, and it's very worrying that such a simple error can be made with our modern computers and decide who wins or loses a tournament. What do you guys think though? Is this a one-off problem, or is our reliance on computers going to come back and bite us?